Let's go back to December 2008. Greece is on fire. And I don't mean that figuratively. This wasn't just a protest, it was a nationwide revolt, the most intense civil unrest the country had seen in decades. And this wasn't just some random explosion of anger. No, this was a crisis that had been brewing for a long, long time, with deep roots in the nation's economy, its politics, and its history. So that really brings us to the central question, right? How could one single, tragic event, a single gunshot, ignite a fire that would engulf an entire nation? That's what we're going to unpack.
Okay, so it all starts with one moment, a single fatal shot. This was the spark that lit the fuse.
So picture this. It's a Saturday night in Athens, in a neighborhood called Exarcheia, which is kind of famous for its radical, anti-authoritarian vibe. An encounter between a group of teenagers and the police takes a turn, and it turns deadly. An officer fires his weapon, and a 15-year-old boy, Alexis Grigoropoulos, is killed. That single act of violence became the spark.
And the reaction? It wasn't delayed, it was immediate, it was violent, and it was absolutely massive. What followed was just an explosion of pure fury that spread like wildfire from Athens to every major city in the country.
Just look at the scale of this. We're talking 200 million euros in damages. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just mindless smashing of windows. These attacks were targeted. They went right for the symbols of capital. Hundreds of banks and big multinational chain stores were attacked and burned.
And the economic hit went way beyond property damage. The unrest dragged on for weeks, completely shutting down commerce in city centers. The cost in lost business? A staggering 1 billion euros. This tells you right away, this wasn't a one-night riot. It was a sustained, nationwide crisis.
But maybe the most incredible thing is who was out on the streets. I mean, this was not your typical protest group. It was this unprecedented coalition of people. You had high school kids and university students, of course, but you also had newly arrived migrants, unemployed workers, even rival football hooligans, all marching side by side with anarchists and leftists. They all found a common enemy.
It became obvious pretty fast that this collective rage was about so much more than the death of Alexis Grigoropoulos. His killing was the spark, for sure, but the whole country was like a tinderbox, just waiting for a match. So the real question is, what was the fuel?
Well, first and foremost, you have to look at the simmering economic frustration. That was the main ingredient here, a deep-seated despair, especially among young people.
The media even had a name for them, the 700 generation. And that phrase, it just perfectly captures this feeling of complete hopelessness. Think about it. You spend years in school, you work hard, you get a university degree, and what's your best prospect? A precarious, temporary job paying around 700 euros a month. The promise that hard work pays off, it just felt like a total lie.
And the stats, man, the stats really back this up. Right before the riots hit, youth unemployment was at a shocking 24.3%. That's almost 1 out of every 4 young people without a job looking at a future that felt totally empty.
And on top of all that economic anxiety, you had this complete collapse of trust in the system itself. I mean, it felt like every day there was a new government scandal. Corruption, bribery, you name it. There was this pervasive feeling that the entire political establishment was rotten to the core.
But here's the thing. Economic anger alone doesn't really explain how everything went down, the specific way the protests unfolded. For that, we got to dig into Greece's pretty unique history of rebellion. It's almost like there was a cultural blueprint for it.
Remember that neighborhood Exarcheia where the shooting happened? Well, that location is so important. For decades, it's been the heart of radical politics in Athens. And right at its center is this legendary, almost sacred building, the Athens Polytechnic University.
When you look back at modern Greek history, you see this pattern just repeating itself. Go back to 1944. Police fire on protesters, and boom, over a month of street fighting. Fast forward to 1973. The military government brutally attacks students occupying that very same polytechnic, and that becomes the beginning of the end for the dictatorship. So you see, the 2008 revolt wasn't something new. It was just the latest chapter in this long story of state violence triggering a massive popular backlash.
And this history, it's not just something you read about in textbooks. It is a living, breathing part of the culture. That 73 Polytechnic uprising, it's honored in schools every single year. It even led to a really unique law called the University Asylum Law, which basically banned police from setting foot on campus. So universities became these protected zones for protesters. It got to the point where protesting and occupying buildings became this rite of passage for young Greeks. This history created a ready-made script for rebellion.
So, when you put all the pieces together, the spark, the fuel, and this historical blueprint, you really start to get the full picture of Greece's winter of discontent. There was a slogan painted on walls all over Athens during the riots, and honestly, nothing sums it all up better than this. The first stone was for Alexis, the rest are for us. Just think about that for a second. The first act of defiance was for him, for the kid who was killed. But everything that came after, that was for them, for their own lives, their own frustrations, their anger at a system they felt had completely abandoned them.
Ultimately, it's this combination that explains the sheer scale and intensity of the 2008 riots. The tragic shooting of Alexis Grigoropoulos was the spark, absolutely. But it landed on a pyre that had been built from years of economic despair and was shaped by a historical blueprint for protest that is just deeply embedded in Greek culture.
You know, what happened in Greece was born from its own very specific, very potent mix of history and modern grievance. And it kind of makes you think, doesn't it? What are the unique histories, the unspoken frustrations, and the cultural blueprints for protest that are lying just beneath the surface, right where you live?